Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys football. The fellas heading to the Big Ten as the Maryland Terps go on the road and play the Penn State Nittany Lions. This is going to be a good one, and from a matchup standpoint, all the talent that Maryland has at wide receiver going up against probably the best secondary in the Big Ten with Penn State. I'm very excited from a draft standpoint to watch guys like Rakeem Jarrett, Joey Porter Jr., Jair Brown, Dante Demas. It's going to be a loaded matchup of talent. Before we get into the matchup of the teams, though, again, I just want to say thank you guys for real for all the support you guys have shown the channel. We love making these videos. We love talking ball, especially with you guys in the comments section. So if you like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let us know in the comment section who you got in this game. Penn State coming in as 12-point favorites at home. I think I do like that side, but Dill, let's get into it. What are your early leans here?
This one has me conflicted because I think as like a Michigan fan, I'm big time biased towards Maryland and thinking they're really, really good. But honestly, through the rest of the season, they have not played very good football. Obviously, losing to Purdue is not great. And they haven't looked like that team we saw against Michigan where they have the physical talent to just beat teams. I mean, like losing to Wisconsin badly. And it just not the Maryland I thought I saw against Michigan. So I'm not sure they're deserving of being in that conversation of teams relevant to Big Ten.
Yeah, this Maryland team was a team that we are very high on coming into the summer. 6-3. They haven't exactly been bad, but you look at their big wins. They beat SMU early, which was a very good win. SMU can score a lot of points. They hang around and play Michigan pretty tough. They go and beat Michigan State at home. And then after that Purdue loss, like they just haven't really looked the same. I know Talia has been kind of banged up, but you barely squeak one out on the road at Indiana. Indiana's not a very good team. Then Billy Edwards plays, and you barely beat a Northwestern team that is not very good. And then you get beat pretty badly by a Wisconsin team that has been very inconsistent this year. Talia having easily his worst game of the year is 10 of 23 for 77 yards. With all the offensive firepower and talent at the wide receiver spot, there really doesn't seem to be an excuse for him to only put up 77 yards, even if it's against a solid defense in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and even that, not running the ball, only 66 for Hemby, who's been pretty good for the most part as a young player. So I think he's a guy to watch out for in the Big Ten moving forward. But yeah, I'm not convinced they're that team that played Michigan. I don't think they are. They've filled out that squad like we thought. We all knew they had the talent at wideout. We all know Talia can play. When he's playing well, he plays really well. But I'm not 100% sure they're there yet, although they may be on their way. But I don't think this season it's...
And that was what we got out of the Michigan game was, this might be a better roster kind of in the trenches than we thought. They've kind of had some skill at the wide receiver position. They've had some skill at the quarterback spot, at the running back spot. But they haven't had like a complete roster where they're tough in the trenches on both sides of the ball and they have good tacklers on defense. This year they look kind of the part, but the last couple of games it's really hard to be optimistic about Maryland as a team. And you even look at some of the playmakers, there's like no excuse. And we have a buddy Rock who's a Maryland fan. And I keep texting him like, why is Rakeem Jarrett not getting the ball? Somebody as dynamic as him, a guy that I legit thought could be a day one pick in the 2023 NFL draft. And he's got 34 catches for 377 yards. He's averaging 11 yards per catch. Like, not nearly the explosive playmaker that I thought he would be this year.
And that's true. You just look like they're spreading the ball around okay. They got 4 guys over 300 and a few in the mid twos. But you're right. When you have a guy like Rakeem Jarrett and you're a team like Maryland that is trying to punch their way into the upper echelon, you got to feed your stars. You got to feed the guys who would legitimately play at the Michigans, at the Ohio States, and at the Penn States. And I think you're right. They're just not getting the ball to him, and that's the guy who they need. And he needs to have a bigger year than what he's going to have, it looks like.
And when you look at who they're going against in Penn State, this is a Penn State defense that is really starting. They had a really bad week against Michigan. Other than that, and Ohio State kind of moved the ball against them, but I wouldn't say they were dominating Penn State's defense. I mean, there were a lot of interceptions. There were a lot of turnovers that gave Ohio State some short fields. This Penn State team, especially in the back end, is extremely talented. Again, Kalen King, Joey Porter Jr., Jair Brown, absolute playmakers. They're averaging 2 forced turnovers per game. They're allowing only a 53% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks. Maryland's going to want to throw the ball. I mean, they've ran the ball pretty well with Roman Hemby, but they want to throw the ball. That's where your playmakers are. If Maryland's winning Big Ten football games, it is through the air with those playmakers. I don't see that happening against a Penn State defense, especially in the secondary where they're just so talented.
Yeah, I mean, because you're right. If you watch back that Ohio State game and in really every other game Penn State's played, their defense is really, really right up there in the Big Ten. I think is one of the better units. And I don't know. Is Maryland going to have the power to do what Michigan did to them? Michigan's ground game is a different animal at this point in the Big Ten, and I just look at this Maryland team. Yeah, they ran the ball pretty good against Michigan. And they've had their moments with Hemby, but I don't think they're going to be able to physically beat up a smaller athletic Penn State defense. That's probably, if you're going to try to target them, you want to do it the way Michigan does. But there's just I don't think Maryland's got that horsepower.
And I love guys like Roman Hemby and Littleton, but it just seems like if Maryland is going to play their brand in winning football, it's got to be through the air with those explosive playmakers. On the offensive side of the ball, I do think Penn State will be able to run the football on this Maryland team. Maryland's been pretty solid against the run. You take a look at what they've been doing, only allowing 3.8 yards per carry. But again, this Penn State offense is built to go through the ground. But you're also seeing kind of an emerging passing attack. Sean Clifford, if you guys have been listening to us for a while, he is a plus Big Ten quarterback, in my opinion. That's kind of the quote I've been used. He's no stud. He's not going to go win you a Big Ten title consistently, but he's also going to be a kind of a solid veteran guy. But you're seeing that passing offense become a little bit more explosive. He looked pretty solid minus some turnovers against Ohio State, looked very good against Indiana. And you're starting to see some of these wide receivers for Penn State, even more importantly, kind of get it going. We know the young running backs, Singleton, Katron Allen, both getting it done on the ground, both averaging over 5 yards per carry. But you look at some of the wide receivers, especially a guy like Parker Washington, who I thought was one of the better wide receivers in the Big Ten. Slow start to the year, but he's really getting it going. You combine that with guys like Mitchell Tinsley. They are starting to get kind of more two-dimensional and start getting going through the air a little bit.
Yeah, and this is a team that in conjunction with good wideout play, they are using their tight ends pretty effectively. Yeah. I think Theo Johnson's a guy who should be getting more action. I mean, he seems like a legitimate pro at tight end, and similar to how Michigan was able to do it a little bit with Schoonmaker against Maryland, I think they can use a Theo Johnson to work the middle a little bit. And I think Penn State should just be doing that more because he's really good. And when they're ripping it up the seam, they've looked pretty effective. I mean, the thing about Penn State at the end of the day is, can you get rid of the bad side of Sean Clifford where he's making egregious mistakes? Because that is very much what hurt them badly against Ohio State. And it's hurt them in the past. That's just kind of been the issue I think a lot of people have, is there's a couple plays a game it seems like he kind of loses his mind and then puts him in a real tough spot, because that Ohio State game, they kind of had it, I thought.
Yeah, the bad can get pretty bad with Sean Clifford. Now, this Maryland team isn't a defense that is going to force you into bad spots. They don't bring a lot of pressure. They keep everything in front and try to avoid the big play. Sean Clifford's a guy who can work the middle of the field, who can be accurate in those short and intermediate throws. And again, if he doesn't get a little overzealous and doesn't try to do too much, I see them moving the ball enough. I mean, so getting to the pick, Penn State at home, favored by a little less than 2 touchdowns. I see Penn State getting to mid-30s, low 30s, and I don't know if I see Maryland getting much over 20 just because of how good this secondary is. It's a lot of points to be given Penn State against a Maryland offense that can be explosive. That being said, my lean would be Penn State with the points just because I think the matchup is really good. If Maryland wants to hang around in this game and be competitive, I do think it needs to be through the air. I don't know if they can make that happen against a Penn State secondary that is legit.
Yeah, that's right. I still think I'm kind of with you. I think Penn State is a little underrated just because.
Agreed.
I mean, you look at the scores against Michigan and Ohio State. At the end of the day, the Ohio State one did look kind of bad. It was pretty lopsided, but that was pretty much all with 3 minutes of fourth quarter action that pretty much torpedoed the whole game. In the Michigan game, they were bad. I think that's just they just didn't play very good football. But again, you look at almost every other game besides maybe Purdue, they've been really good. Beat Auburn badly. It was a team that played LSU very tough. So I don't know. I feel like people aren't giving Michigan their credit, essentially. So you look at that game, they got smoked. And then people are putting Penn State as like a mid-tier team. They're very much at that top end, I think. And 12 points against a Maryland team that's really starting to struggle a little bit, I don't mind.
Yeah, and one last thing is I think this Penn State defense is really it was really starting to find its rhythm with this Manny Diaz scheme. But Manny Diaz is a guy that, it didn't work out as a head coach, but he's a damn good defensive coordinator. And you give him all that talent. We've been harping on the secondary and how good they are, which they are very good. But that front seven, guys like Curtis Jacobs, guys like Abdul Carter, Chop Robinson, they're no slouches, and they can get after it. And you're starting to see them kind of pin their ears back and get kind of that Manny Diaz aggressiveness. This is to close out. Penn State, obviously, this is not a year where Penn State's going to go win a Big Ten title. That being said, the future is very bright for Penn State. They have a bunch of young studs on both sides of the ball that if you can keep Manny Diaz, keep James Franklin for another year, this offense and defense and this team completely could be a very, very challenging team to beat in the Big Ten the next couple of years.
And if you look at Penn State for the past few years, if they had a quarterback who was really pretty good, I think you look at these past years as much different than what Penn State's put out. Because at the end of the day, they've had their struggles, but a lot of it, I think, was Clifford. And I think
if Will Levis is the starting quarterback for Penn State right now, did they beat Ohio State and Michigan?
Oh, I don't think they beat Michigan, but they not the way they played. But I think they're right up there with. So obviously, they're like maybe Michigan, Penn, Ohio State have put some distance. It feels like. I think that distance is kind of closed, where it's every year those games are set at even lines instead of -7 or something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like for me as well. I mean, Sean Clifford's a guy that he's going to be solid for you, but he's not going to go out and win you big-time football games, especially against teams like Michigan and Ohio State. Next year, with a guy like Drew Allar and how talented he is, with some talented running backs and a talented defense, this team is certainly a team to watch. That's why we talk about Penn State. And again, we'll close it out on that, but for Penn State fans, you got to be excited for the future. And you want to see a strong end of the season. This is a team that has struggled to kind of finish strong in the last couple of years. A very, very good win last week. Build off that and finish this year strong. We appreciate you guys again for tuning in. If you guys do like the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We do appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to y'all later.